The rain pounded relentlessly on the roof, each crash of thunder tearing jagged lines through the thick darkness of the night. In the living room, shadows swallowed everything. The only light came from the faint blue glow of a phone tossed carelessly onto the wooden floor. The air was damp and cold, yet the breaths of the two people burned hot, as if ready to ignite everything in their path. Irina leaned back against the wall, rain-soaked hair falling messily over her bare, trembling shoulders. Her thin nightgown clung to her body, every curve visible beneath the nearly transparent white fabric. Leo stood so close in front of her, his hands trembling between desire and fear, but he had no strength left to step away. Only a few centimeters separated them. The scent of Irina's skin, at once unfamiliar and hauntingly intimate, blended with the smell of rain, sending his mind spinning. "You have to stop. Eva will be home soon." Irina's voice was husky, her eyes shining with a mix of pleading and challenge. Leo lowered his head, his hot breath rolling down the side of Irina's neck. One hand gripped her soft waist firmly, the other, shaking, traced a gentle line from the nape of her neck down her spine. "I know, but I can't stop anymore," he whispered. A soft moan slipped from Irina's lips, blending with the rumble of thunder outside. Their bodies tangled together in the darkness, fingers digging into flesh, each hurried kiss a desperate attempt to keep from losing each other forever. They needed no promises, only flesh and longing. Right now, every boundary and rule, every piece of morality was left far behind. And then, suddenly, the flash of car headlights swept across the window. Was Eva already home? Leo jerked away from Irina, heart pounding out of control, both of them gasping for breath, frozen for a few seconds as if turned to stone. But the memory of that moment would never, ever fade. Perhaps none of this would have ever gone so far if that day I hadn't agreed to move in with my mother-in-law. Everything began in the most ordinary, even dull way. Eva, my wife, had taken on a major project in Europe, which meant she'd be gone for several months. Our house was being renovated, and my work was the sort I could do online from anywhere. Irina, my mother-in-law, lived alone in her spacious house on the outskirts of town, and Eva had insisted I stay with her for convenience to look after her mother. "She's still my mom, please help me take care of her, don't let her be lonely," Eva said, and I didn't think much of it. I could never have guessed that it would be this very loneliness, this silent emptiness that seemed to stretch endlessly through the large house, that would change me and change her too. On my first day moving in, Irina greeted me with a gentle smile. She looked just as she had the first time I met her, soft brown hair tied neatly at the nape of her neck, pale skin still radiant despite the faint traces of age, eyes deep and sad in a way I'd never quite understood. No one could deny Irina's allure. It was a quiet, mature kind of charm that didn't need to be flaunted. Perhaps I had noticed that for a long time, but I always convinced myself it was just respect, just a familial fondness, a son-in-law's feelings for his mother-in-law. That first night, we ate dinner together, red wine glinting in our glasses, gentle jazz playing in the background. I told her about my work. Irina listened, smiling, occasionally asking a casual question about Eva. Sometimes, her gaze would linger for a moment on the hand I held my glass with, before she hurriedly looked away. In the days that followed, I realized how much time Irina and I actually spent together, long, strange silences filling the hours. In the mornings, she rose early to cook breakfast for me, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting under my bedroom door made me feel oddly comforted. Sometimes I'd catch sight of her in a thin sweater, reading by the living room window, sunlight making her skin glow even more brightly. On certain afternoons, as we each worked in our own corners, I'd find myself unconsciously listening for the soft footsteps of Irina on the wooden floor, or sense her standing quietly behind me just to ask, "Would you like some tea?" These small, simple gestures, repeated every day, gradually seeped into my mind, addictive in a way I couldn't name. One evening, rain began to fall. The kitchen felt warmer than usual, soft golden light, the sound of rain drumming against the windows, and across from me, that woman in a white nightdress, thinner than any she'd worn before. A light robe hung over her shoulders, but whenever she moved, the fabric slipped, revealing the smooth, pale curve of her shoulder and the delicate line of her figure. I tried to focus on my phone, but couldn't tear my eyes away from Irina, from her faintly pursed lips to the elegant neck glowing under the light. That night at dinner, we talked more than usual, about old memories, about Eva as a little girl, about trips Irina had never spoken of before. Sometimes my eyes would meet hers, amber-colored eyes that sparkled for a moment, then dimmed as if in fear. When I offhandedly complimented her fish, saying it was better than any restaurant's, Irina just laughed softly. Any man who can appreciate fish like this surely has a sensitive soul. It sounded like a harmless comment, but for some reason it made my heart skip a beat. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was filled with images of Irina, her white skin, her gentle laughter, her whispering voice at the dinner table. I got up and went down to the kitchen for water, only to find Irina still sitting by the window, staring out into the rain. She startled when she saw me, but then smiled, gently waving me over. We sat there together, silent, just listening to the rain, only our light breathing mingled in the air. I felt my heart growing tight, each of her breaths seeming to fill the room and haunt me. That night, for the first time, I dreamed about Irina, a hazy dream of soft lips, the scent of her skin, and the sound of her quiet breath against my ear. In the days that followed, everything began to feel strangely suffocating. I found myself paying more and more attention to every little thing Irina did, the way her fingers brushed the table, the way she sat tilted at the window, the way her eyes lingered too long at my unbuttoned collar. Once I realized I was standing very close to her in the kitchen, close enough to reach out and touch her soft waist. We both went silent, our eyes meeting for a moment, half nervous, half confused. I stepped back first, but the tingling in my hand wouldn't go away. Slowly, I began to realize that this intimacy was no longer just between a mother-in-law and her son-in-law. It was in the way our hands touched and lingered longer than necessary, in the glances that seemed to want to say something but always turned away, in the way Irina would sigh when standing too close, unable to speak her heart. All of it built up, wave after wave, just waiting for the day it would sweep away all boundaries. One night, when Irina invited me to share a glass of wine after dinner, I already knew nothing would ever be the same. I just hadn't yet admitted it to myself, or perhaps I simply hadn't found the courage to step across that line. It was a Saturday morning, and fresh sunlight flooded the dining room. I woke up earlier than usual, quietly washing my face while outside, the sound of the blender echoed, an unofficial signal that another day was beginning. I stepped out of my room and saw Irina leaning over the stove, her hair tumbling down her back, the silvery gray silk robe hugging her slender figure. Under the thin fabric, her curves were more visible than ever. especially when she reached up to grab a glass from the top shelf, her robe slipping aside to reveal just enough of her shoulder and the fullness of her chest to make me stop breathing for a moment. I cleared my throat to announce my presence. Irina turned, smiled, her eyes still drowsy with sleep, an expression that made it impossible for me to look away. She poured tea for me, her slender fingers bringing the cup to my lips, closer than necessary, her fingertips brushing mine. A jolt of electricity shot down my spine. Both of us froze for a second. I awkwardly pulled my hand back, trying to hide my reaction, but I could hear my own heart pounding louder than usual. That breakfast, we talked about trivial things, work, the weather, small stories about Eva, but the air between us was subtly shifting. I noticed Irina was smiling more, her lips bright and full, as if she just licked them, and her laughter, mingling with light breathing, left me restless. Every time she moved, her robe brushed against her thighs, her bare feet making soft, haunting sounds against the wooden floor. After breakfast, I took the chance to fix the loose bookshelf in Irina's study. She stood behind me as usual, but this time, the distance between us was closer than it had ever been. Kneeling to adjust the shelf, I felt her hair graze the back of my neck. A faint scent of perfume, sweet and deep, drifted over me, making me instinctively look up. Our eyes met for a split second, but it felt like some silent current was pulling us both toward an abyss neither dared name. As I tightened the screws, my finger slipped and I got a small cut, a drop of blood welling at the tip. I winced. Irina immediately knelt beside me, worry in her voice. "Let me see your hand." I held it out, and Irina carefully took it, her cool fingers pressing against my skin. That simple touch jolted every sense awake. She dabbed at the blood with a tissue, every motion gentle and deliberate, her eyes focused on every move. She blew softly on the wound, her warm breath against my skin making me shiver, a sensation both sharp and comforting running down my spine. "What kind of man is this, so clumsy?" she teased, her voice gentle with a hint of playful scolding. I laughed, but my heart was pounding. My hand held her wrist longer than necessary. Irina didn't pull away. Instead, her gaze softened, filled with a certain feminine vulnerability I'd never seen before. I quietly studied the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, her smooth skin despite the many seasons of youth she'd lived. Suddenly, I bent my head, almost without thinking, and brushed my lips against her wrist, a furtive, trembling greeting from someone lost in a maze of emotion. She froze for a moment, her eyes wide with surprise, then just sighed, a sound filled with resignation and surrender. No one said anything else. She stood, turned her back to me, fastened her robe, while I just watched, mind spinning with guilt and excitement I'd never known before. The rest of that day, the atmosphere in the house was changed. We avoided each other, exchanging only cold, practical words. But every time I passed Irina, we'd both stop for just a moment longer, needing to feel each other's presence. Light touches, glances that lingered, quickened breaths, whenever we found ourselves together in the kitchen each moment, like a silent dance, between two people too afraid to name their own desire. That night, Irina retreated to her room earlier than usual. I stayed in the living room, trying and failing to lose myself in a book. I kept replaying the feel of her soft hand, her breath warm against my skin, the look in her eyes. My mind spun out countless scenarios, from the sweet to the sinful, from the gentle to the feverish, until all of them shattered into a wild, consuming longing. That night, I dreamed again. In the dream, Irina was no longer my mother-in-law. She was a vibrant, living woman, her lips red and calling my name in the darkness, her hand stroking the burning flesh of my chest, soft moans trembling in the air, punctuated by endless kisses. I awoke in the middle of the night, heart racing, body alive with a raw, unfamiliar sensation. I knew I'd already gone too far. But in that moment, I realized neither Irina nor I could ever turn back. Another rainy night descended, heavy and relentless. Lightning split the sky, rain crashed against the roof, making the entire world feel like a labyrinth of secret, repressed desires. I sat alone in the living room, the lights flickered, then went out, a blackout. The only glow left came from a small blue flame of the candle I'd just lit on the table. The air grew strange, thick with darkness and anticipation, halfway between fear and the certainty that something was about to happen, something that could never be undone. I heard soft footsteps along the wooden hallway. Irina appeared, dressed only in a thin silver-gray nightgown, her pale skin almost glowing in the shadows. Her hair was still damp, a few drops of water trailing down her neck and shoulders, making her appear both fragile and irresistibly alluring. In the candlelight, every curve of her body was revealed. She was no longer my mother-in-law, but a mature woman, alive and brimming with feminine instinct, a sensuality that had been suppressed for far too long. She stood before me in silence, her eyes flickering as if wrestling with something inside. I said nothing, simply stood up, taking step after step towards her. The space between us grew thick with everything we dared not name. The warmth of her skin and the subtle trace of perfume drifted between us. I reached out to touch her arm, just the lightest touch, but it made both of us tremble. "Irina," I whispered, my voice hoarse, as if afraid to shatter the delicate spell that had wrapped around us. She gazed back, eyes glistening, lips trembling, and then, without a word, she softly placed her hand against my chest, feeling my heart racing wildly. I leaned down, searching for her lips with mine, both of us trembling and awkward, like forbidden lovers tasting each other for the very first time. At first, our kisses were gentle, tentative, but soon they became feverish, primal. The rain outside seemed to seal the room off from the world, making it a secret haven for two sinners. My hands traced the bare slope of Irina's shoulder, feeling the warmth and softness of her skin. She moaned softly as I drew her closer, her breath warm and ragged against my neck, her body trembling, no longer offering even the faintest resistance. Her hands explored my bare back, her nails dragging lightly, leaving heated trails across my skin. Her nightgown slipped from her shoulders, revealing nearly all of her ripened, womanly body, every curve and mark of time becoming beautiful and mysterious in the darkness. We tumbled together onto the sofa, lips seeking each other desperately. Soft moans, harsh breaths, forbidden sounds filled the room. My hand slid down the length of her back, savoring the silky skin, the heat of her body pouring into every embrace, every squeeze. Irina arched up, her trembling lips grazing my neck and then my chest, her fingers digging into my arm as if afraid that even the slightest slackening would make this moment vanish forever. Each time I touched her, she shuddered, not only from the cold, but from a lifetime of pent-up desire now bursting forth in stifled moans and desperate clutching. I buried my face in her hair, inhaled her scent, kissed her shoulder, and then the fullness of her breast. Each gasp, each moan, each collision of our bodies melded with the rain outside, composing a secret symphony only she and I could hear. Right then, there was no right or wrong, no mother-in-law or son-in-law. In that moment, we were just two lost souls, consumed by longing and emotions long buried. I lifted her face, gazing deep into eyes that now held nothing but surrender, wet, blazing, and filled with need. Together, we crossed the line, leaving all the old boundaries behind the closed door. When it was over, we clung to each other on the sofa, breath still uneven, hearts pounding. Irina pressed herself against me, her heart thundering as if ready to leap from her chest. I kissed her forehead, murmuring unconsciously, "I'm sorry, I can't stop anymore." Irina only held me tighter, silent. Outside, the rain kept falling, but within that room, every rule had been washed away, leaving only two bodies searching for each other in the darkness and in sin. The next morning, it was as if nothing had happened. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, washing the room in a gentle glow as I awoke on the sofa. A thin blanket draped over me, my body still bearing the lingering warmth of that wild, illicit night. Irina was already up, as always, quietly preparing breakfast in the kitchen. But I knew, from the moment our bodies had joined in the rain, that every boundary between us had been erased. That morning, the glances we exchanged were heavy with secrets. Whenever I drew close, Irina would glance up, her eyes meeting mine before darting away, her cheeks flushed in a way I'd never seen, and I found I couldn't hide my own hungry gaze. The air in the house was no longer the silence of two distant souls, but something thick, electric, charged with the lingering obsession of bodies not yet sated. The day passed with a strange, artificial normalcy. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to what had happened. The feel of Irina's body pressed to mine, the desperate breaths, the muffled moans tangled with the fear of being discovered. Occasionally, I'd pass the kitchen just to watch her slender back, hair falling softly, the delicate shoulders, and the faint red marks left on her skin, reminders of a night when we'd abandoned every restraint. That night, I couldn't sleep. Darkness pressed in on the house, the ticking clock a relentless reminder of sins still burning hot. I wandered down to the kitchen and found Irina standing at the window, quietly sipping wine. One look was all it took. Neither of us spoke. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her from behind. Irina trembled but did not pull away. Her breath warmed my neck as her hand searched for mine, gripping tight as if afraid to lose that last bit of warmth. We made love right there, on the cold kitchen table, in the darkness sliced by a single beam of light from the garden. Ragged breaths, two bodies moving together in a secret rhythm. Her nightgown slipped to the floor, her bare skin glowing under my hungry kisses. I lifted her onto the table, her long legs wrapped around my waist, each touch, each thrust as if to fill all the lonely years for us both. Irina tried to stifle her moans, only letting out soft, trembling sounds whenever I held her tighter. The scent of skin, the wine, the thick, musky perfume of longing, all of it swept me away, loving her until I forgot where I began and she ended. Afterwards, we leaned against each other, clinging close, listening to our hearts beat in unison. It was no longer mere lust, but a fierce hunger to love and be loved, to possess, to hurt, and to forgive all at once. In the days that followed, every space in the house became a stage for our secret cravings. The bathroom in the early morning, Irina washing her hair, steam curling around her body. I slipped in behind her, my arms sliding around her waist, lips pressed to her neck, my breath blending with her shaky sighs. Irina tilted her head, her bare hand pressed against my chest, her eyes dreamy in the mist, and again we lost ourselves in each other, bodies slick and trembling, all distance dissolving in the hot water. Out on the balcony at midnight, when the city was silent, we met in secret once more. Irina, in her thin nightgown, leaning against the railing, her gaze far away but her hand finding mine, pulling me into her private world. Just a slow stroke down her spine, a stolen kiss in the shadows, and I lost all control. Each time I felt her heartbeat and breath change, sometimes slow, sometimes urgent, rising into those breathless, wet, irresistible moans. But alongside the intoxication, guilt and fear grew. Whenever Eva called, Irina and I tried to act normal, but just the briefest brush of hands at the table was enough to leave us both breathless, hearts racing. I could see fear and regret in Irina's eyes. She knew we were destroying everything, but neither of us was strong enough to stop. One night, after a secret tryst in the living room, Irina lay her head on my shoulder, confessing in a broken whisper, "If Eva ever finds out, I don't know what I'll do with myself." I squeezed her hand, tried to comfort her with a kiss on the forehead, but even I didn't know how much longer we could keep lying. Each time we came together, we lived balanced between drowning and terror, wanting to stop but unable to pull away. Forbidden love didn't just entwine our bodies, it strangled our hearts, dragging us deeper into a pit of torment, longing, and guilt we couldn't explain. And then, one day, Eva called to say she would return sooner than planned. Suddenly, the house felt suffocating, every secret on the verge of exposure. Both Irina and I knew our time was running out. That fear only made our secret moments all the more urgent, frantic, burning hotter than ever before. The blare of a car horn at the gate made my heart seize. Just a few days earlier, Eva had called to say she'd be back soon, but I had secretly hoped those words meant nothing. Yet that gray afternoon, a familiar taxi pulled up outside the house, and Eva stepped out, smiling, suitcase in hand, approaching what looked like a home with everything still perfectly in place. I rushed out to greet her, forcing myself to appear natural. Irina was already at the door, her lips painted bright red, but her eyes glimmered with a worry she couldn't hide. I saw her hand trembling as she opened the door for her daughter. The atmosphere inside the house changed instantly. Every movement became awkward and cautious, as if each breath might shatter the fragile mask we'd both been wearing these past days. That night at dinner, Eva asked about my work, about her mother's health. I answered with curt, clipped phrases, eyes avoiding Irina's. Irina, for her part, kept herself busy, getting up for the salt, sitting back down to slice bread, always dodging the eyes of both me and Eva. Only the clatter of the knife on the cutting board and the soft clinks of dishes broke the stiff, unnatural rhythm of each gesture. After dinner, Eva went upstairs, leaving Irina and me to clean up in silence. When I accidentally brushed my hand against hers while carrying a plate, both of us froze, hearts pounding, breaths coming quicker. Irina looked up at me, eyes glistening with tears, as if she wanted to apologize for everything, as if she was drowning in the fear of being discovered. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The sound of running water from the bathroom, Eva's footsteps up and down the hall, everything made me so tense I could hardly breathe. I wanted nothing more than to run to Irina, to hold her tight, to lose myself in her scent and warmth. But now, a thick wall of regret, shame, and fear separated us. 2 days later, in the late afternoon, Eva texted asking if I'd seen her silver necklace. I didn't think much of it, simply replied, no. But that evening, as Eva searched in her mother's room, I heard her suddenly break down in sobs. I rushed in and saw her clutching a silk scarf, one Irina, and I had used to hide our marks after each secret encounter, still faintly carrying my cologne. "What is this, Mom? Whose is it? Why is it in your room?" Eva screamed, her eyes wild with suspicion and heartbreak. Irina froze, lips trembling, speechless. I stood there, throat parched, not knowing what to say or how to explain. In that tiny object, all our secrets, all our carefully spun lies disintegrated into nothing. The entire house was thrown into chaos. Eva collapsed on the floor, sobbing again and again. "What have you done, Mom? What have you two done?" I couldn't meet her eyes. Irina could only cover her face and weep, her sobs ragged and sharp, slicing into my chest. From that moment, the house was no longer a home. It became a prison of lies and guilt. Eva locked herself in her room for 3 days, refusing to come out. Irina and I wandered the halls like two condemned souls, passing each other silently, not daring to touch, not daring to look. Some nights I could hear Irina quietly weeping in her bedroom, the muffled sounds drifting through the door. I wanted to go to her, to hold her tight, to promise I'd bear all the pain for her. But I knew, deep down, that we had crossed a line that could never be undone. A week later, Eva packed her bags and moved out to stay with a friend. The day she left, Irina stood in the doorway, red-eyed, forcing a weak smile. I wanted to beg Eva to stay, to apologize, to explain everything, but I could only watch her disappear behind the door. The house grew emptier and colder than ever. Now, Irina and I were left with nothing but the memory of our bodies and the ache of guilt, lingering in every look, every helpless touch. We loved each other more recklessly than ever. But at this point, our passion had become a heavy stone, crushing every hope, every belief in the future. Forbidden love, once exposed, leaves behind only the ashes of passion, wounds that never heal, and heartbreak that can never be avoided. The house that was once full of warmth and stolen moments now held only the sound of wind rustling through the curtains, shadows stretching endlessly across every room. Eva was gone. The kitchen no longer rang with laughter. The living room had no one sipping tea in the morning sunlight. Everything was plunged into a cold and heavy silence. I wandered through the familiar rooms, finding Irina's traces everywhere. Her perfume lingering on the towels, her silk robe draped over a chair, a faint red lipstick mark on a wine glass. I knew that with every passing minute, it became harder for Irina and me to face each other as we once did. The truth had been exposed. Love and guilt tangled together, choking every apology, crushing any lingering hope of a peaceful tomorrow. Irina grew ever more silent, withdrawn into the room at the end of the hallway, never speaking a word about what had happened. Some nights I still heard her crying in the dark, those sharp, aching sounds dragging me back to reality, reminding me that everything had changed forever. Then one night, after days of avoiding each other, I found Irina sitting by the living room window, moonlight draped across her tangled hair, her face weary, her eyes distant as she stared out at the back garden. I moved closer, sat down beside her without a word, and placed my hand gently on her shoulder, for the first time in so many days apart. She didn't pull away. Irina leaned her head on my shoulder, her sigh soft as a farewell. "Leo, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice rough. "No, it's both our fault," I answered, my voice breaking. She smiled faintly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "We were both wrong. We were both too weak." I couldn't hold back any longer. I wrapped her in my arms, feeling Irina's body trembling against mine. My fingers traced her thin back, while her hands clung to me as if she never wanted this moment to end. No explanations, no promises were needed. We both knew this would be the last time. I leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, tearful kiss, both painful and sweet, just like our very first. We clung together on the sofa, restless hands searching, breaths quick and full of regret. Irina's body burned beneath my touch, every breath, every soft moan etching itself deep into my memory. We loved each other madly, not to possess, but to say goodbye. When everything finally quieted, we stayed entwined for a long time. Her head rested on my chest, her hand trembling as she stroked my hair for the last time, as if she wanted to carry this memory into the deepest corner of her heart. Tomorrow, I'll leave. Maybe that's best for everyone. I could only stay silent, my tears falling onto her hair. Leo, live your life the right way and forget me. But if there's another life, I'd still wish for just one more chance to love like this, even if only for a fleeting moment. She left the next morning, leaving nothing behind except a short letter and the lingering scent of her perfume on the pillow. I read her words, each line cutting into me. Thank you for making me feel alive again, for letting me feel wanted, for letting me be a woman once more. Don't torture yourself, don't hate me. Keep this love as a sweet secret, just for the two of us. I never replied to her letter, and I never sought her out again. The days passed, everything gradually fading into the past, but on rainy nights, I still found myself dreaming of a woman with soft skin, sorrowful eyes, and breathless sighs as if they still lingered somewhere in the darkness. Forbidden love, even when it ends, leaves behind an ache that never fades. A corner of memory I know I will never forget for the rest of my life.